Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us for today's IBM Tech Exchange webinar. I'd just like to go over a couple of housekeeping things before we begin. You should see a Q&A box towards the bottom of your screen where you can begin to submit any questions that you have for today's presenters. And later today, you'll be sent a link to the on-demand recording, as well as a link to the IBM Tech Exchange community where you can connect directly with our experts. So without further ado, I will hand it over to today's presenters.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Muriel. I'm going to be the presenter today of this webinar, talking about what's new in DevOps Test 11, together with Stuart Walker, who is going to give us a demo at the end of this short presentation. So the subject here is what's new in DevOps Test, but before that, we want to introduce you with the new IBM DevOps software delivery platform that has been announced in December last year, and who's changing a little bit the way IBM is going to follow on IBM DevOps products. For instance, the rational test automation server, rational test automation products are being all rebranded to adopt a new DevOps test name. It's not a big change, but it changes little things. So I will comment on that, and then we'll switch into the actual new version of the DevOps test platform. That is version 11. We'll give a word on the new data fabrication functionality that has been introduced since one version, I think, but is more mature now in version 11. And we will not have a demonstration of the data fabrication. We will have a showcase on the new artificial intelligence technique that has been introduced into this release, with two subjects. One is for performance testing, and the second subject is the subject of the demonstration, is how we can use AI to help us shiftless testing our user interface. And Stuart is going to give us more details about that and is going to give us a demonstration. So IBM DevOps Automation has created a new unified release in 2023 in December. So we call that release 2023.12, and we will keep that naming convention. Every quarter we'll have a new version, new release of all the DevOps automation products. That is a single release unifying all the product in the DevOps portfolio. So I gave you here the link to go to look at the official announcement, giving you all the details. But as a summary, I can say that the DevOps portfolio has been aligned into 5 big pillars. One is the plan, to be able to plan the work. The other one is the creation of asset. So it can be model or code. Third one is the test. That is the purpose of our presentation. And after those assets has been tested, they can be deployed using DevOps Deploy. All that being connected to our DevOps data lake that will take all the information, will capture all the delivery metadata, all the test results that can be captured into the DevOps data lake will be then able to be analyzed and presented in a very nice form to the user, who will be able to analyze how the DevOps process is working and how it can be maybe better and uh, provide a lot of information to the team to follow the creation and deployment and of those assets. So that's the accelerate box. So all that aligned under one single release. Our rational test automation product have been rebranded, and now we are DevOps Test. So that's a very small change, because in fact all the product stayed the same. But in fact, when you install and when you are going to use the new version of the product, you will see new directory being created. So the ancient IBM Rational menu on the Windows platform has disappeared, and now it's replaced by DevOps Test. And it's just a detail, but it showed that the naming convention has been implemented even into the directory name of the product when you install, and all the name have been changed on the user interface. So I put the renaming announcement link here in case you get lost and you're looking for an old rational product and you want to find what is the new name. You can find it here. So that's all for now for this. So the DevOps test now, capabilities stay the same. We still have the UI testing, performance testing, API testing, all encapsulated into our test workbench that is now called DevOps Test Workbench. But we can still, create a suite of tests, mixing UI, performance, and API to create compound test approach where we could have a scenario for testing an application, also including open source coming from the outside. So we leverage that as well. And all that can be then deployed onto our test server that is called Test Hub with the new renaming. So on Test Hub, this is where we collaborate. This is where we see all the result of the different test campaign. This is where we share all the assets around testing. This is where also we can run our virtualized service. If we have missing components, we can create a virtual service using test integration and API and deploy it onto the test hub for faster testing. If there is something missing on the test environment, it can be replaced by the virtual service. And the last piece is the data fabrication, where we can now generate data. And I will go to the next slide to speak a little bit in more details. So data fabrication is now accessible from the web console of the test hub. It has now an authoring menu in which we can create data definitions, and from those data definitions create data sets. Those data definitions can contain pre-built and customizable data generators, so we can really create definition and then generate the data. And it's easy to use on the web console of the test hub. So we'll will not demonstrate that today, but we will in the future. Then the second theme of the new version of DevOps test is artificial intelligence. So that technique can be used for testing, and especially for performance testing when we have performance test campaign. Can be long, can be complicated, with a lot of information coming from various resources that we are monitoring on the system. It's maybe not easy to find or to understand what is in fact the result of this test campaign. So we can now bring some automation insight to proactively identify source of concerns. So we can show some issues that could be challenging for a user to find by using AI to understand performance issue and to really understand if it is a performance issue. So mitigate that performance issue with, the parameter on the system on which we are running the application, but also concerning the number of user and the response time, and mixing all those parameters to find a real source, an issue being a real issue. The second area in which that release of DevOps tests use AI techniques is around UI testing. So the idea is to not wait until the UI is totally created to be able to test it. So maybe we could, advance the creation of UI test using modeling, using some information available to the developer to create the UI, and so start to create the test before we have the user interface on the test environment. And I will now leave the screen to Stuart, who's going to give you a little bit more details about that specific functionality that we call design-driven testing, and give you a demonstration.
Perfect. Thank you, Muriel. And welcome everybody. So let me start off by sort of going backwards. I was introduced to this feature probably somewhere between 3 and 6 months ago, and initially found it quite a confusing proposition. And I think looking back, the reason I found it confusing was because it's a very new paradigm. It's a very different paradigm in what is quite well-trodden path for test automation and UI automation. But my experience with this so far has been fantastic. It's sorry, there are things flashing on my screen, and I'm just making sure that you can see everything I'm showing. Yes, you can. So essentially what I did was I spoke to our engineering team and our product management teams, and we elicited problem statements and the idea of what it was we were trying to produce. And fundamentally, when you think about, I'm an API tester by craft. I do integration testing and service virtualization historically, and it's only in the last probably 3 to 5 years I've got involved with UI testing. And this concept of shift left, it isn't and hasn't really been a thing in UI testing, because it's very difficult to start testing a user interface before that user interface exists. And so testers have been in this awkward place for as long as automation has been around, where everybody's working towards delivering an application. Everybody wants to get this application out the door, And almost the last people to get hold of that application, and the gatekeepers sometimes to getting it out the door, are the testers, that quality assurance to say, this is what it should be. And so those testers have had to balance getting the product out the door and the pressures from various stakeholders with quality and with the doubt that maybe we didn't do enough testing, maybe we didn't have enough time to do enough testing. And as I say, really that comes down to this dependence on the real applications. And so our developers and our product managers were sort of positing, what if we could shift left UI automation in the same way we've shifted left a lot of other types of testing, and what if we could develop tests against designs? And really it's only in recent times where AI and machine learning has come about that we've been able to think about doing that, because there is no standardized design like in an integration or an API space. We have schemas, we have open standards that we can work to, and we can assume that applications will follow. I mean, the UI space, there isn't that same uniformity, and so it's now with AI and machine learning that we can start to think about solving this problem using visual techniques to recognize controls and text and widgets on a screen, and employing some more traditional techniques, as I'll come on to show you as well, like healing, to take those designs and crystallize them into real tests. If I can make my slide go ahead, there we go. So I want to just, before I show you the demo, I want to outline what the workflow is to using our new DDT, our new design-driven test feature. And it's relatively simple. It employs a lot of technologies under the cover, but all of those technologies are inside the box, so to speak. And I know a lot of you will be existing customers of the IBM DevOps tools, and you'll already be using IBM DevOps Test UI, or what you might have previously known as RFT, Rational Functional Tester. So one of the points I want to make is this is all in the box. There is no additional charges. There is no additional module you need to install. This is all there for you inside the box. It's also, because of that, very secure. Everything is where you install it. There's no data being sent out to third-party servers. There's no sharing of sensitive information. It's all part of your product, under your control in your environment. And so, from a user perspective, what we need to think about doing to use this feature is, first of all, accessing designs. And we'll come on to talk about what those designs, can look like in a second. And loading those designs into the application, we then employ computer vision techniques, which involve all sorts of different layered techniques. We're using some research projects and some modules from Meta, or what was formerly called Facebook, Detectron 2. That's the sort of the backbone of our approach to this computer vision. And what that's going to do is it's going to classify all of the objects it can see on the page into typical widgets or objects, however you want to think about them, like checkboxes and edit boxes, drop-down boxes, labels, and so on. And it will do a fantastic job of that as far as a computer can. But ultimately, there will always be a degree of fine-tuning to that output model. And you'll see that when we go into the demo. So that's step 3 on the slide. When these models are created, we can then create tests from them. Rather than accessing the live application, we can access the design screens, interact with them as though they were a live application because we've identified all the different controls, and create something that we can then play back against the live system. And now when we play it back against the live system, you'll see again in the demo a real example of this, but when we play it back, we're playing it back with our sort of AI augmented understanding of what we think the application may look like. But in reality, object locators, anybody who's done UI testing in the past will know, object locators are different from application to application. And although we might look at a text box that is for username, there's every opportunity that the developer of that control has labeled it something else, not username. And so at the point of execution, we'll employ our old favorite friend in RFT, in DevOps Test UI, guided healing, which will then take those design-driven test models and crystallize the object location properties to effectively, as it says, crystallize your test, make it such that your test is now testing based on the actual object parameters. So it's a mapping from one to the other. And again, that's sort of as automated or semi-automated as you choose it to be. And I'll show you that in the demonstration. So with that, let's jump into, let's have a very quick look at what we mean by a design. I get involved personally in working with our engineering team on design quite routinely. There's barely a week goes by where I'm not sticking my nose into one meeting or another and positing my opinion and saying, well, this box here should be a bit longer, and this should be over here, not over there, and maybe we should have a button on the screen, and the button should be called login. And so this is quite typical of what people might use as a wireframe mock-up type environment. It's quite collaborative, and you can iterate on designs, and you can add more controls and more reality, more fidelity to these designs as your application progresses. And I raise this because, as I say, there are multiple different ways people will produce designs. Some people like to use a traditional whiteboard, and they'll draw pictures on a whiteboard, and that's fine. You can take pictures of them, convert them to JPEGs or PNGs, and load them into the tool. Some people will use a wireframing tool like this, and some people will use more high fidelity imagery. If they're using Adobe Figma or something like that, it could be that it actually looks, to all intents and purposes, like the real application will. And so what we can do in our DevOps Test UI is we can take a look at some of those balsamic mockup screens that I showed you. So I've loaded them in already. You'll see some fresh images in a second or two, but here's a couple of screens that we've loaded in. One, very, very simple, just a couple of text boxes and a login button. And if I click on those, then you'll see over here on the right how we've classified these fields, having loaded them in. So we've got an edit box, we've got a label is username, we've got a password, and we've got another text box and a button, and so on and so forth. If we jump to a slightly richer example, something perhaps modeling a retail online store, again, we can sort of showcase what features have been identified on this page and perhaps what features haven't. And as I said before, the AI and the vision recognition modules are not perfect. That's just reality of any product that employs AI and vision techniques. There is a degree of fine tuning and fine control. So, for example, here on the page, we've missed this order total, and it's probably because of the fonts, and something else. And I'm sure it will be tuned, this model over time to produce a match on those things. But meanwhile, I need to do my testing, and I want to work with this area down here, this order total. So I can actually highlight it manually. I can draw boxes around it. I can choose what type of item this is. So in this case, let's say this is a label, and I can tell it what the content is. In this case, a little bit of text. Maybe I'll do the same with the price. And we say, maybe this is a text area, and we can put our price in there. So I can augment all of those different properties and all of those different fields, and I can manipulate anywhere. Perhaps we've got spelling mistakes and things like that. I think we went past one earlier on here. You can see this imagery. The font size is very, very small, And I've done this on purpose to try and highlight this. User name has been transposed by our OCR routines as user gnome. Now, the reality is that doesn't really matter, because in our test execution, in our playback, our guided healing will figure that out. It will move us beyond that. But if I wanted to, and I wanted to say, I'm going to be very specific and I'm going to fix this up right from the outset, I can change that. So we're building very robust, very resilient test cases, but you can still tune the model to be accurate. All right, so let's create a new application configuration, and we're going to use our DevOps test hub as our sort of target application. I'm going to use the sign up process. So throughout this demo, we're going to navigate all the various different screens involved in logging in a new user or setting up a new user and creating a new project and that sort of thing. Type of thing you would do if you were an automation tester in our own DevOps testing. So here in the application configuration page, I'm going to start by adding a new application. And in my case, this is going to be a web application because Test Hub is in the web. And we start with details of the application. So I'm going to drop in, first of all, my URL for the application. You'll see that's this live application over here. This is where we're going to ultimately play these tests against when we're finished. And this, of course, can be a dummy URL, and we can substitute it later on. But I want to try and skip a few phases for you here. And I'm just going to call this my webinar demo. So that's how we'll see it in these screens, and we'll reference it. Now, obviously, we want to load some designs for this application. So we're going to come into this second tab and add some designs. And the designs that we want, I don't think we need all of these, but we'll probably be good with those ones. Yeah. So you see I've got 6 different designs there, and these are high fidelity designs in this instance. I showed you quite low fidelity designs with our balsamic screens earlier on, and how we recognize those. This is a much more high fidelity set of designs, so the sort of thing that our own team produce in Adobe Figma. So when our developers are given a task to create a new page or a new widget or whatever, I sometimes look at the designs myself, and I assume that feature and function is already existing because it looks so so much like the real product. So that's all being processed right now in the background, and as I say, that process itself is all self-contained on my machine. I'm not running any kind of supercomputer or anything like that. I've just got a standard laptop. Took a minute or so, but it's processed all of these 6 screens. And if I just go back, you'll see now we've got my webinar demo application in here. I can see the URL. Haven't bound any tests into that yet, of course. I could go back and I could change the URL. I can change the name of it. I can add additional designs or take designs away. But ultimately, we want to work with these designs. So what we're going to do first is we're going to order these screens. We've just loaded 6 sort of semi-random images in. So I'm going to drop the first screen in, which is our sort of login page where we click on the sign in button. And then the next screen we're going to work with is the sign up details. Then we're going to be presented with a license agreement check. So it wants us to agree that we're installing and using Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge in Test Hub. And then we'll land on a sort of a landing page that says, welcome on board. And we're going to click on this button to create a new project. And then we'll add some details for our new project. And then ultimately, we want to make sure we're in our new project and we can operate on it. So again, just having a look at, what is it that we've been able to identify? Well, all of the controls on this page, the labels and the passwords and the buttons and so on are all, nicely identified for us. We can see here this sign up link. I'll come back to this in a second, in a little while, but note that that's actually recognized it as a label. I'm not going to fix that right now. I'm not going to set it as a link, but that's mainly so I can show you how resilient this whole process is, and then it'll get crystallized in the actual test guided healing process. So we can see that there. If we have a look at all the controls on this page, we can see there's all sorts of labels and lots of edit text and buttons. Over here, we've got some checkboxes that we're going to work with, and they are anchored by these labels that are next to it. And again, let's just have a look. There was one place I wanted to come back and check. So yeah, submit button is there. The save button. Sometimes, as I said before, the OCR and the image recognition doesn't quite manage to read the controls correctly. So here we've got a button, and unfortunately, it hasn't recognized that it's got save written on there. So we're going to modify that. And in this page, we've got another sort of instance where it's not quite worked out that it's new project on a single button. As I say, these models will improve a lot over time. But for now, I'm going to manually change that to say new project. And then again, we're going to work with this edit box, which is anchored by this label up here. We're going to hit this create button. And again, we can see the create buttons kind of got a little bit funky with the little characters it's picked up there. That would probably work. We probably could identify that in the test, but I'll clean it up anyway. And then finally, here on this last page, we've got controls. We're probably not going to do much on this last page. We'll just check that it's loaded and we've created a new project. So that's it. That's all I need to do. Most of what I did there was just loaded in and let the AI and the algorithms do their work. I've made a couple of small tweaks and changes, and now I'm ready in DevOps Test UI to actually go and create a test. And if you've used Test UI before, you'll be very familiar with this process. We're going to create a test from a recording. We're going to use a web UI test as the recording. I will drop this in here and we'll call this webinar test 1. And instead of going from our usual approach of launch a browser, set the URL, access a live application, instead of doing that, which we'd normally do, this time we're going to access one of our application designs. And the one we're going to work with is our webinar demo, the one we just created. And that loads us into, if you've worked with our mobile recording tool before, this looks very, very similar. So you're in the browser, the screens are loaded here down at the bottom, and everything I do now to interact with these screens, these designs, remember this isn't the live application, these are the designs, everything I do on here is going to be recorded as a step in the test down here on the right. So what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to sign up a new user. So I'm going to click on sign up here, and you'll see we've got the step, click on label sign up. Next, I'm going to skip to the second design screen, and I'm going to start entering some details. So I'm going to say my name's Stuart, and my surname's Walker. And you'll see as I click on these edit boxes, it's presenting me with the option to type text in there, and I can make that much bigger if I want to. Forgive me for writing garbage in here, but it just needs to be unique. So we'll pop some details in there. That's all captured as we go along. We'll pop in a password. Again, I promise I don't use this actual password for real. And we'll click submit. That then takes us to our next page where we're presented with this license agreement. And we need to click on these checkboxes. So first one, second one, and then we're going to hit save. And we've clicked on checkboxes, we've hit save. And then over here, we're in the landing page where we want to press and create a new project just to make sure we're in the team space and we can actually create a project. and then we're going to give our new project a name. And we'll hit create. And then on the very last page, maybe we'll just click on something just to see that this page is present and is visible. Maybe we create some verification points or something like that. So all of those steps there recorded for us. And now all I need to do is terminate my recording, and we're presented with our new test. And again, for all those who on the call have used Web UI before, RFT, DevOps test, Web UI test approach, you'll be familiar with this. It's all natural language, and it's all driven with our trademarked Smart Shop. So not only do I see the steps in the test, click on the label whose content is sign up, click on the input field whose label is first name, but I can also still index all of those properties on the page, and I could add verification points and so on and so forth. Maybe I want to add a verification point for this property here, and we've got the model of what that application looks like. But what you'll see is, unlike a normal model for Web UI, this is very flat. And that's because we can't identify any real hierarchy, because we've identified it all from its visual components. And that's not a problem for us, but I just want you to notice that, because when we run the test and use guided healing, we will then convert it into a real hierarchy, a real model of the application. Without further ado, let's run this test. In fact, no, sorry, before we do that, let's just have a look at some of these properties that we've identified. So you'll see here, click on input field whose label is first name. So this input field is an edit text, if you like, and its label is first name. So our AI, our module, has identified that this text box here is likely associated with this label above. And of course, we could change that, and we could manipulate it however we want. But you'll see we've kind of faked these identification properties. And again, these are the things that are going to change as we run the test and as we heal the test to crystallize it into a real executable test that will test things as a traditional Web UI script. So let's run this test. And in order to do that, all we need to do is say run test up here, and we need to select this option to collect data to update test steps. And again, if you're familiar with Web UI, you'll have used this lots before to help you maintain your tests. When things change in your live application, this is what you use to enter that guided healing process to repair your scripts and to make them play back in a more resilient, robust way that can perhaps navigate beyond object identification changes and things like that using clever algorithms and techniques. So we're going to use this to help us map and model between our AI-derived visual representation of what we think the application is going to look like from its designs and the real application that we're just about to run this test against, because now the real application is ready. Maybe we built these tests a few weeks ago, a month ago, or even hours ago. Doesn't really matter. We're now going to play them against the real system. So I'll hit finish, and we'll let that kick off. And it's going to play back against the live system. You'll see the report starts here in the background. This window here is the actual playback screen. And what you're seeing now is the URL loaded for the real DevOps Test Hub application that I showed you earlier. And so playback now is using a combination of the real application intelligence and the AI-derived information to enter data into each of those controls. And you see it plays back just like a normal Web UI test would, going from screen to screen. So we've created the user at this point. We're agreeing the third-party licenses. We're going to create a new project and name it. and we'll hit create, and then we land into this page where we can just validate that the project has actually been created. And that's it. That's playback complete. The test report here shows us that the test took, just under a minute to play back. Everything seemed to go well. Tells us, what platforms we ran on and so on. Nothing out of the ordinary in here. And we can see all of the different screens and screenshots for what actually happened. Now, if we navigate through, what we'll see is that, for some of these actions, even though they're green and they passed, our guided healing was in action. It was working busily away in the background going, well, you told me to click on a label with the content sign up. But I couldn't find a label with the content sign up. So I clicked on something that looked as close as possible to that. So it's found something down here, which actually happens to be a link, not a label. So it's managed to click on it, and we're now going to go into a healing mode where we jump back into our test, and we're going to do what's called scan and mark. So if I click on this button here at the top, it's highlighting each of the controls where, actually the AI got it absolutely bang on, spot on. The developer and the AI were in sync. The actual field where we wanted to enter the email does have a label called email. It's quite possible that it may have been lowercase, or it may have been, e-mail or anything like that. But in this case, it's a spot on hit, exactly right, and that's why this is green. But up here, this very first step, you can see this says we're going to click on the label whose content is sign up. So the AI identified that sign up text there as a label rather than a link, probably because it didn't have an underline. Usually links have an underline. But even though it wasn't a match, it still managed to play back. And so what I would do is I would simply say overwrite or update the test step based on what the guided healing found. And now what you'll see is, well, actually the test definitions have been updated or crystallized to say, click on the hyperlink whose content is sign up rather than click on the label whose content is sign up. And I can do that for all of these fields. I can either do it individually like this and check each and every one of these differences, or I can do it en masse and do a complete update. And so with that, I pretty much finished my demo. I hope what that's done is it's shown you how easy this technology is to work with, how it blends seamlessly into what you already use today within DevOps Test UI, if you are an existing customer, or how easy it is to use if you're not. We'd love to get your feedback. We'd love to answer your questions. This is available now, as Muriel said, in DevOps Test 11. And it's only going to get better over time as we, improve models and add, new functionality. We're busily working on a new feature right now to create automated, what we call hotspots, that will take you in your design from page to page based on information that you give the tool. So I should know, for example, when I click on sign up, that it will take me to this design. And when I click on submit, it will take me to this page automatically. And those sorts of things will only make this product easier and better to use. So with that, I will, I think we have a couple of slides just to flick on screen. Oops. Let me do that. There we go. And Muriel, I don't know if we have any questions or if you want to wrap up.
So I do not see any question into the area for questions. Do you see any question, lady? No.
No, all questions has been answered. Oh, one just came in.
Yeah. So the demo shows, do you see it, Stuart?
Yeah, I can see that. We'll read the question out. So the demo shows design-driven testing for UI designs. Does the AI support design-driven testing also for middleware designs if it is a visual representation of the processing of interface data from A to B? For example, TIBCO BusinessWorks messaging for an enterprise service bus. So the short answer is no, it doesn't. But I think I'd be interested to know, maybe we can catch up after the session. I'd be interested to know what you think would help in that context from an AI perspective. And I would wager, because with an enterprise service bus or with any API or integration, typically you would have a schema already. So we've already got the information in terms of how to communicate with that service, and we can build tests in advance. We can do design-driven tests with APIs and integrations. What we don't necessarily have is the data, and that's where it gets quite tricky, because either you need a huge volume of data, or the data is sensitive, or you just need to be able to generate data that satisfies a number of conditions. And so Muriel showed earlier on the slides, one of the newer features we've delivered quite recently is our data fabrication. And potentially this is something that you would look to rather than to AI as a way of, or maybe even augmented by AI. And we do have in the lab some work we're doing with OpenAI to facilitate the creation of fabricated data. Potentially, that's something we can show in the next webinar. But obviously, we'll always be happy to talk to you direct.
Yeah. So in the last slide here, we are advertising the DevOps automation community, because this is where you will get a lot of information, and also for the next webinar, if you are interested to follow the demonstration of what's new in version 11, this is where we are going to advertise the webinar, tell you what we are going to show, and if you are interested, don't hesitate to ask questions also on the community. We are here to answer, and it helps us a lot to have questions, so we can see where is the interest and how we can make progress.
Absolutely.
So we are 10 minutes before the hour. I think we are done for this session, and I don't see any more questions.
Yeah, perfect. Well,
okay.
That was
yep.
Pleasure to present everything today. And any more questions, we're always here to help answer them. And I look forward to the next one, Muriel.